Haunted Dorm, the true story behind the missing student of Hantseong University. What happened to 5 college friends in room 306 would change their lives forever and reveal a decade-old murder that should have stayed buried in the walls. 1:17 a.m., October 21st, 2005. A cold Friday night in Seoul, South Korea. The wind whistled through the nearly empty streets surrounding Hantseong University's sprawling campus. Autumn leaves skittered across the cobblestone pathways, dancing in small cyclones before settling against the aging brick buildings. Most windows across campus had gone dark hours ago, save for a few dedicated students burning the midnight oil. But in the distance at the edge of campus, where the buildings met a small wooded area, 5 young women stumbled up the path toward the Magnolia building, their laughter cutting through the night air. Min-ah pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, silently cursing herself for not bringing something warmer. At 21, she prided herself on being the responsible one in their group, yet tonight she'd let her friends talk her into just one more round of soju at their favorite bar 3 times over. The alcohol's warmth had faded during their 20-minute walk back to campus, leaving her shivering in the October chill. "Hurry up," Ji-eun called from ahead, her words slightly slurred as she fumbled with her phone's flashlight. "It's freezing out here." Min-ah quickened her pace, glancing over her shoulder at the darkened path behind them. For a moment she could have sworn she saw a shadow move between the trees, but when she squinted there was nothing there. Just her imagination fueled by too much alcohol and too little sleep. Between her communications major coursework, her part-time job at the campus coffee shop, and the emotional aftermath of her breakup with Jun-ho 3 weeks ago, she was running on fumes. "Did you see something?" Soo-yeon asked, falling back to walk beside Min-ah. Unlike the others, Soo-yeon had paced herself at the bar, nursing just 2 drinks all night. "No, nothing," Min-ah replied, shaking her head. "Just jumpy, I guess." Soo-yeon nodded, but her eyes lingered on the tree line before she turned back toward the path. "You've been on edge all week. Is it the Jun-ho thing?" Min-ah sighed. "Partly. But also, I don't know. Haven't you felt it too, like something's off in the dorm lately?" Before Soo-yeon could answer, Yuna's voice rang out from the entrance of their building. "Are you two planning to sleep out there? Come on." The Magnolia building stood as one of the oldest dormitories on campus, a 4-story brick structure built in the 1970s that the university had neglected to renovate properly for decades. Most students preferred the newer accommodations on the west side of campus, but for Min-ah and her friends, the significantly lower rent outweighed the building's flaws. The temperamental heating, the occasional water pressure issues, and the persistent musty smell that no amount of air freshener could mask. Their room 306 occupied the corner of the 3rd floor. Some said it was cheap because of what happened there 10 years ago, but no one talked about it, at least not directly. Just whispers in the hallways abruptly silenced when a resident assistant walked by. As they approached the entrance, Haiwan ran ahead, digging through her purse for the key card. "I swear if I lost it again, the housing office is going to kill me," she muttered, her voice carrying in the still night air. "Check your coat pocket," Minna suggested, catching up to the group. Haiwan patted her jacket and broke into a relieved smile as she produced the card. "What would we do without you, Minna?" "Probably be locked out." "Again?" Ji-eun teased, the moment Haiwan pushed open the door. Min-ah felt a distinct shift in the air. The hallway felt colder than usual, and Min-ah could swear someone was watching from the shadows at the end of the corridor. She paused, scanning the dimly lit entrance hall, but saw nothing out of place. Just the worn furniture, the bulletin board covered with flyers, and the old payphone that hadn't worked since last semester. "Do you guys feel that?" Min-ah asked as they walked toward the stairwell. "Feel what?" Yuna asked, already halfway up the first flight of stairs. "I don't know, it's just cold." "That's because this building is ancient," Ji-eun replied, rolling her eyes. "Remember last winter when our bathroom pipes froze? I thought I would die before they fixed the heating." Min-ah followed her friends up the stairs, trailing her fingers along the wall. The building always made noise, settling sounds, pipes knocking, wind whistling through poorly sealed windows, but tonight it seemed almost alive, as if it were breathing. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as they reached the third floor. The hallway stretched before them, illuminated by fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows on the worn linoleum floor. Room 306 was at the far end, past a row of identical doors. As they approached their room, Min-ah's stomach dropped. The door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. "Did we leave the lights on?" Soo-yeon whispered, coming to a stop beside Min-ah. "No, I definitely turned them off before we left," Min-ah replied. Her voice hushed. "And I locked the door. I always do." The five women stood frozen, staring at the partially open door. "Maybe the security guard checked on something," Ji-yoon suggested, but the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her unease. Min-ah stepped forward, pushing the door open wider with her fingertips. The main living area of their suite appeared untouched, the small kitchenette to the left, the worn couch and coffee table in the center, the desks lined up against the right wall. Everything seemed to be in its place. "See, nothing's wrong," Yuna said, pushing past Min-ah into the room. "Someone probably just forgot to close the door properly when we left." Min-ah remained unconvinced. Her eyes scanned the room, methodically looking for anything out of place. The suite consisted of a common area and two bedrooms, the larger one shared by Soo-yeon, Yuna, and Haewon, and the smaller one occupied by Min-ah and Ji-yoon. Both bedroom doors were closed. "Wait," Min-ah said, suddenly pointing to the handle of their bedroom door. "What's that?" Hanging from the doorknob was a white shirt, a woman's button-up blouse with short sleeves. It swayed slightly as if disturbed by a draft. "That's not mine," Ji-yoon said, stepping closer. "Is it yours, Min-ah?" Min-ah shook her head slowly, approaching the door with cautious steps. "I've never seen it before." The others gathered behind her as she reached for the garment. As soon as her fingers touched the fabric, Min-ah recoiled. A large reddish-brown stain spread across the front of the shirt, already dried, but unmistakable in its nature. "Is that—" Haewon's voice trembled. "Is that blood?" Min-ah swallowed hard and forced herself to touch the shirt again, this time lifting it carefully from the doorknob. The material felt stiff where the stain had dried. She turned it over in her hands, examining it more closely. Inside the collar, nearly hidden by a fold, was a small embroidered tag with delicate characters. Jung S.Y., Jung S.Y., Min-ah read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The name hung in the air like a physical presence. They all knew it, though none of them had ever spoken it aloud in this room. Jung Seo-yeon, the second-year literature student who had disappeared without a trace from campus 10 years ago, last seen walking to the restroom during a midterm exam. The administration had tried to contain the story, but the rumors had persisted through generations of students. "This has to be a prank," Soo-yeon said firmly, though her face had gone pale. "Someone's messing with us because we live in this room." "But how would they get in?" Yuna asked, glancing nervously at the door. "And why tonight?" Min-ah's gaze returned to their bedroom door. With a deep breath, she grasped the handle and turned it, pushing the door open slowly. The scream that tore from Yuna's throat shattered the tense silence. The small bedroom had been completely ransacked. Drawers pulled from the dresser and emptied onto the floor bedding, torn from the mattresses, books scattered across the room. The desk lamp lay shattered on the ground, and the window curtain hung at an odd angle, partially torn from its rod. But what drew their collective gaze was the wall above Min-ah's bed. Written in what appeared to be the same reddish-brown substance as the stain on the shirt were 5 words, "I know what you did." "What the hell?" Ji-yoon whispered, clutching Min-ah's arm so tightly it hurt. "Who would do this?" Min-ah stood frozen, staring at the macabre message. The room felt wrong, the air too heavy, too cold. She could feel pressure building in her ears like when an elevator descended too quickly. "We need to call campus security," Haywan said, already pulling out her phone. Her face fell as she looked at the screen. "No signal. That's weird." One by one, the others checked their phones. None had service despite having full bars just minutes earlier outside the building. "The landline in the common room," Soo-yeon suggested, turning toward the door. Min-ah nodded absently, still transfixed by the message on the wall. As her friends hurried to the common area, she stepped further into the bedroom, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The shirt still dangled from her fingers, its presence almost forgotten until she felt it grow colder, as if it had been stored in a freezer. A soft sound caught her attention, a whisper so faint she might have imagined it coming from somewhere near the old wardrobe that stood in the corner of the room. The large wooden piece had been there when they moved in, too heavy and cumbersome to remove its antique style, clashing with the more modern furniture provided by the university. Min-ah's eyes fixed on the wardrobe as the whisper came again, slightly clearer this time. "Help me." She took an involuntary step back, her heel crunching on broken glass from the lamp. The sound seemed to break whatever spell had momentarily held her, and she turned to flee the room only to find Soo-yeon standing in the doorway, her face ashen. "The phone cord is cut," Soo-yeon said, her voice shaking. "Someone deliberately cut it." "We need to leave," Min-ah replied, pushing past her into the common room, where the others stood huddled together. "Now." A sudden crash of thunder made them all jump, and seconds later rain began to pound against the windows with unexpected ferocity. "Where did this storm come from?" Yuna asked, peering through the blinds at the downpour. "It was clear just 5 minutes ago." Min-ah looked from the rain-lashed windows back to the blood-stained shirt still clutched in her hand. Something about this felt deliberate, orchestrated, as if someone or something wanted them trapped here tonight. "It's just a sudden shower," Haywan reasoned, though her voice lacked conviction. "Let's go to the RA's room. They'll have a working phone." As they moved toward the door, the lights flickered once, twice, and then stabilized. Min-ah paused, glancing back at the bedroom doorway. For just an instant, she thought she saw a figure standing there, a young woman in a white blouse, dark hair obscuring her face as she looked down at the floor. When Min-ah blinked, the figure was gone. Outside their suite, the hallway lights had dimmed significantly, casting the corridor in murky shadows. The 5 women huddled closer together as they made their way toward the resident assistant's room at the opposite end. "Do you think someone broke in to rob us?" Ji-yun asked, her voice hushed as they walked. "Nothing seems to be missing, though." "This wasn't a robbery," Min-ah replied, holding up the blood-stained shirt. "This was something else." They reached the RA's door and knocked repeatedly, but no one answered. "Seong-ah's probably out for the night," Soo-yeon said after a minute of unanswered knocking. "She mentioned something about a date." Haewon turned to face the others, determination replacing the fear on her face. "Let's try to reach security from the payphone downstairs. If that doesn't work, we'll run to the next building, storm or no storm." As they turned back toward the stairwell, a loud crash echoed from the direction of their room, the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. "Someone's in our room," Yuna whispered, clutching Soo-yeon's arm. "Or still in our room," Min-ah corrected, a chill running down her spine as she remembered the figure she thought she'd seen. They stood paralyzed with indecision until Haewon took charge again. "Downstairs! Now!" The stairwell was even darker than the hallway, the emergency lights providing only minimal illumination. Their footsteps echoed loudly as they descended, the sound seeming to bounce back at them from multiple directions, as if someone else was moving in the darkness. Min-ah, bringing up the rear, couldn't shake the sensation of being followed. Every few steps she glanced behind her, half expecting to see someone or something pursuing them down the stairs. The air in the stairwell felt unnaturally cold, their breath visible in small clouds. When they reached the ground floor, Haewon pushed through the door first, holding it for the others. Mina was the last to exit, and as she passed through the doorway she felt something brush against her hair like fingers gently running through the strands. She whirled around, but the stairwell was empty. The lobby was deserted, the usual security guard nowhere to be seen. The payphone hung on the wall near the entrance, its plastic casing yellowed with age. Soo-yeon approached it, first lifting the receiver to her ear. "Dead," she announced, replacing the handset with a frustrated sigh. "Of course it is." Outside, the storm had intensified, rain pounding against the entrance doors with such force it seemed it might shatter the glass. Lightning flashed briefly, illuminating the darkness beyond, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. "We can't go out in that," Eunice said, staring at the deluge. "We'd be soaked in seconds, and the security office is all the way across campus." Min-ah looked down at the bloodstained shirt still clutched in her hand, unable to explain why she hadn't dropped it or left it behind. Her fingers traced the embroidered name tag, Young Swai Young Seo Yeon, the missing student whose disappearance had become the university's most persistent ghost story. "Maybe we should stay in the lobby until morning," Ji-yun suggested, eyeing the worn couches in the sitting area. "Safety in numbers, right?" The others nodded in agreement, but Min-ah remained silent, her mind racing. The vandalism in their room wasn't random, it was targeted. The shirt with Jung Seo-yeon's name, the message on the wall. "I know what you did." It all felt personal, specific, but none of them had any connection to Jung Seo-yeon. They'd been children when she disappeared 10 years ago. "I think we need to find out more about Jung Seo-yeon," Min-ah finally said, looking up from the shirt. "Whatever's happening, it's connected to her." "You can't be serious," Ji-yun replied, eyes wide. "You think this has something to do with a girl who disappeared a decade ago? This is clearly some sick prank." "A prank where someone broke into our room, vandalized it with what looks like blood, left a shirt with the missing girl's name, and cut our phone line," Min-ah countered. "That's not a prank, I don't know what that is." Soo-yeon, always the most practical of the group, sat down on one of the couches. "Min-ah might be right. This feels too elaborate to be random." "But what can we do tonight? The library's closed and we can't access the archives until morning." Min-ah paced the small lobby, the shirt still in her hands. Every few seconds, lightning illuminated the room in harsh white flashes, casting strange shadows on the walls. During one such flash, Minna could have sworn she saw a figure standing just outside the glass doors, face pressed against the pane, but in the darkness that followed there was nothing. "I know someone who might be able to help," Hae-won said suddenly. "Professor Kim from the history department. She did a whole research project on campus folklore a few years back. She lives in faculty housing on the north side." "We can't go out in this storm," Yuna protested, gesturing to the raging downpour outside. "No, but we could try to reach her dorm," Hae-won continued. "It's connected to the humanities building by the covered walkway. If we cut through the science building and use the underground passage, we could make it most of the way without getting soaked." Min-ah nodded slowly. "It's worth a try. Better than sitting here waiting for whoever trashed our room to find us." As they debated the best route to take, a sound from the stairwell door made them all freeze, a soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails against wood. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. "What is that?" Yuna whispered, shrinking back against the wall. The tapping continued for several seconds, then stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, they could hear something else, a faint, muffled sound that might have been weeping. Without warning, the stairwell door swung open. The 5 women instinctively huddled closer together, staring at the dark rectangle of the doorway. No one emerged, but the weeping sound grew slightly louder. Min-ah felt a tug in her chest, an inexplicable pull toward the sound. Before she could stop herself, she took a step toward the open door. "Min-ah, don't," Ji-yun hissed, grabbing for her arm, but Min-ah shook her off. "There might be someone hurt," she said. though even as the words left her mouth she knew it wasn't true. Whatever waited in that stairwell wasn't someone in need of help, at least not the kind of help the living could provide. She took another step forward, the blood-stained shirt clutched to her chest like a talisman. The weeping grew more distinct, a woman's sobs punctuated by words too faint to make out. Minna reached the threshold of the door and peered into the darkness. At first she saw nothing. Then, as her eyes adjusted, she made out a figure crouched on the landing between the first and second floors. A young woman in a white blouse, her long dark hair cascading over her face as she wept into her hands. "Hello?" Minna called softly, her voice echoing in the stairwell. "Are you okay?" The figure went still, the sobbing cutting off mid-breath. Slowly, ever so slowly, the woman raised her head. Through the curtain of hair, Min-ah could make out a pale face and the glint of eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. "Can you help me?" the woman asked, her voice strange and hollow as if coming from somewhere much further away than the short distance between them. "I'm lost. I can't find my way back." Min-ah's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and run, but she remained rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the figure on the stairs. "Who are you?" Min-ah managed to ask, though she already knew the answer. The woman stood in one fluid motion, her movements jerky and unnatural. She pushed her hair back from her face, revealing features that might once have been pretty, but now seemed somehow wrong, too sharp, two pale eyes, too dark and deep-set. "You know who I am?" the woman replied, taking a step up the stairs toward Min-ah. "You're holding my shirt." Min-ah looked down at the blood-stained garment in her hands, then back at the figure ascending the stairs. With each step the woman took, the temperature seemed to drop further, until Min-ah's breath clouded before her face in a white mist. "Jung-seo-yeon." Min-ah whispered the name, falling from her lips like a prayer or a curse. The figure paused, tilting her head at an unnatural angle. "He's coming back," she said, her voice suddenly clear and urgent. "The man who killed me. He's been watching you, all of you, for weeks." A hand grabbed Min-ah's shoulder, yanking her backward out of the stairwell. She stumbled into Soo-yeon, who slammed the door shut and leaned against it, face drained of color. "What the hell were you doing?" Soo-yeon demanded, her voice trembling. "You were talking to yourself, Min-ah. There's no one in there." Minna stared at the closed door, her heart pounding. "You didn't see her? The woman on the stairs?" The others exchanged worried glances. "There was no one there," Hae-won said gently, as if speaking to a frightened child. "Just shadows, and the emergency lights playing tricks on your eyes." Min-ah looked down at the shirt still clutched in her hands, the dried blood dark against the white fabric. "She said he's coming back. The man who killed her." A heavy silence fell over the group, broken only by the ongoing storm outside and the occasional creak of the old building settling around them. "Killed her?" Yuna finally asked, her voice small. "Jung-seo-yeon wasn't killed. She disappeared. No one ever found." She trailed off as the implication of her own words sank in. "No one ever found her body." "I think," Minna said slowly, raising her eyes to meet the frightened gazes of her friends, "she wants us to find her." The storm showed no signs of relenting as morning approached. Lightning continued to fork across the sky in brilliant flashes, thunder rumbling so deeply it seemed to shake the foundations of the aging dormitory. The 5 women had spent the remainder of the night huddled in the Magnolia Building's lobby, taking turns to stay awake while the others tried, mostly unsuccessfully, to sleep on the worn couches. Min-ah hadn't closed her eyes once. The blood-stained shirt lay on the coffee table before her, a silent reminder that what they were experiencing was far from normal. Every time she began to doubt what she'd seen in the stairwell, her gaze would drift to the garment, to the embroidered initials, Jung Sewai, and the certainty would return cold and sharp as a blade. "It's almost 6, Soo-yeon murmured, checking her phone for the 100th time. Still no signal. Min-ah nodded, unsurprised. "The others still asleep," Somehow, Soo-yeon replied, glancing at their friends sprawled awkwardly across the lobby furniture. Ji-yoon was curled into a tight ball on one end of the couch, while Yoona and Hae-won had pushed two armchairs together to create a makeshift bed. What do we do now? Wait for someone to come in for an early class? First students usually start arriving around 7:30, Min-ah said, rising to stretch her stiff limbs. We could wait, but what? Min-ah walked to the window, peering out at the rain-lashed campus. The sky remained dark, though whether from the early hour or the persistent storm clouds she couldn't tell. I can't explain it, but I feel like we're running out of time, like something bad is going to happen if we don't figure this out. Figure what out exactly? Soo-yeon asked, joining her at the window. What happened to Jung Seo-yeon 10 years ago? That's a cold case, Min-ah. The police couldn't solve it. What makes you think we can? Because she's trying to tell us something, Min-ah replied, turning to face her friend. I know how that sounds, but after what happened in our room, can you honestly say this is just a prank? That shirt has her name in it, Soo-yeon. And the blood? She trailed off, remembering the figure on the stairs, the unnatural angle of her head, the hollow quality of her voice. He's coming back, the man who killed me. I think we should go back to our room, Minna said suddenly. Soo-yeon's eyes widened. Are you insane? Someone broke in there, vandalized it, and left that? She pointed at the blood-stained shirt. We should be getting as far away as possible, not going back. If we leave, we'll never know what's happening, Minna argued. Besides, it's safer now that it's getting light. If someone did break in, they're probably long gone. Before Soo-yeon could protest further, a sound from upstairs made them both freeze, a door slamming followed by footsteps overhead. Security, Soo-yeon whispered hopefully. Min-ah shook her head. The way our luck is going, doubtful. They woke the others, quickly explaining the situation in hushed tones. Reactions were mixed. Ji-yoon and Yoona wanted to leave immediately, while Hae-won sided with Min-ah, curious despite her fear. We'll be careful, Min-ah assured them. We stay together, we don't split up, and at the first sign of trouble we run. Deal. Reluctantly, they all agreed. As they approached the stairwell door, Min-ah hesitated, remembering what or who she'd seen there hours earlier. But sunlight now filtered through the high windows, casting weak gray light into the lobby. And somehow the prospect of climbing those stairs seemed less terrifying in the early morning dimness than it had in the dead of night. The stairwell was empty, no sign of the weeping woman Min-ah had encountered. They ascended cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The air grew noticeably colder as they climbed until, by the time they reached the third floor, they could all see their breath misting before them. Why is it so cold? Yoona whispered, hugging herself. The heating can't be this bad. It wasn't this cold last night before we went out, Ji-yoon added, her teeth chattering slightly. The third-floor hallway stretched before them, identical doors on either side leading to other suites. At the far end, the door to room 306 remained partially open, just as they'd left it hours ago. No light spilled from within. The bulbs that had been on when they fled had either burned out or been switched off. I don't like this, Yoona murmured, gripping Soo-yeon's arm. Something feels wrong. Min-ah felt it too, a heaviness in the air, a pressure against her eardrums that made it difficult to focus. Despite the chill, sweat beaded on her forehead as they approached their door. The common room was just as they had left it, though it seemed darker, the weak morning light unable to penetrate fully through the rain-streaked windows. Min-ah flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. Power's out, she muttered, reaching into her pocket for her phone to use as a flashlight. The screen remained black, unresponsive. And my phone's dead. Anyone else? One by one they checked their phones. All were completely drained of power despite having varying charge levels the night before. This is impossible, Hae-won said, staring at her device. Mine was at 80% when we left the bar. Min-ah moved deeper into the room, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The door to their ransacked bedroom remained open, the message on the wall barely visible in the dim light. She felt drawn to it once more, pulled by something she couldn't explain. As she crossed the threshold into the bedroom, a soft tapping sound began, rhythmic, deliberate, coming from inside the wall near the old wardrobe. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. "Do you hear that?" she asked, turning to the others who had followed her into the room. They nodded, faces pale in the gray light filtering through the window. "It sounds like knocking," Suyan said, stepping closer to the wall, "like someone's trapped inside." Mina approached the massive wooden wardrobe that stood against the wall. It was an antique piece, heavy oak with intricate carvings entirely out of place among the standard-issue dormitory furniture. They'd assumed it had been left by previous occupants, too cumbersome to remove. The tapping continued, more insistent now. Mina pressed her hand against the wall beside the wardrobe, feeling for vibrations. The plaster felt ice-cold beneath her palm, colder than could be explained by mere poor insulation. "Help me move this," she said, grabbing one side of the wardrobe. Ji-yun and Su-yeon hesitated, then moved to assist. The three of them pushed with all their strength, but the wardrobe barely budged, as if anchored to the spot. "It's too heavy," Ji-yun panted, stepping back. "Or something's holding it in place," Mina replied, examining the wardrobe more closely. She ran her hand along the side that met the wall, feeling for any sign of attachment. Her fingers encountered a small gap, and when she peered into it, she could see that the wall behind the wardrobe looked different, newer, the plaster a slightly different shade than the surrounding wall. "The wall's been repaired," she said, straightening. "Recently, from the look of it." The tapping had stopped, replaced by a silence so complete it seemed to press against their eardrums. Then, just as suddenly, it began again, louder, more frantic, like someone desperately trying to get their attention. "We need to get help," Yuna said, backing toward the door. "Professional help, police, security, someone." Mina shook her head. "No one will believe us without evidence. We need to find out what happened here, what happened to Jung Seo-yeon." "And how exactly do we do that?" Ji-yun demanded, her voice rising with fear. "Break down the wall. Call a ghost whisperer." "The library," Haewon said suddenly. "We could look up newspaper articles from when she disappeared. There might be information about suspects or where she was last seen." Mina nodded. "Good idea. And we should try to find out more about this room too. Why Jung Seo-yeon would be connected to it." As they debated their next move, a loud crash from the common room made them all jump. They rushed out to find that one of the light fixtures had fallen from the ceiling, shattering on the floor. "This place is falling apart," Ji-yun muttered carefully, stepping around the broken glass. "Or something wants us out," Mina replied quietly. Despite the ongoing storm, they decided to make a run for the library. Grabbing umbrellas and raincoats, they hurried across the campus, heads bent against the driving rain. The library was mercifully open, a few early rising students already occupying the study tables on the first floor. They headed straight for the archives section in the basement, where physical copies of newspapers and university publications were stored. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Park, recognized Haewon, who had worked part-time in the library the previous semester. "You girls are here early," she remarked, peering at them over her glasses, "and looking like you've had quite a night." "Research project," Haewon explained smoothly. "We're looking for information about an incident that happened on campus about 10 years ago. A student who disappeared, Jung Seo-yeon." Mrs. Park's expression darkened. "Why would you be interested in that unfortunate business?" "Historical research," Mina interjected. "For Professor Kim's class on campus folklore." The librarian didn't appear convinced, but she directed them to the relevant archives nonetheless. The Seoul newspapers covered it extensively. Start with October 1995, that's when it happened. They settled at a study table in the corner of the archives room, surrounded by bound volumes of newspapers and university yearbooks. For the next 2 hours, they pored over every article they could find about Jung Seo-yeon's disappearance. The facts, as reported, were these: Jung Seo-yeon, A 20-year-old literature student disappeared on October 17, 1995, during a midterm examination. She had asked permission to use the restroom and never returned. Campus security cameras had malfunctioned that day, a coincidence that raised suspicions but led nowhere. An extensive search of the campus and surrounding areas yielded no clues. There were no witnesses, no evidence of foul play, and no body was ever found. "Look at this," Soo-yeon said, sliding a newspaper across the table. The article was dated 3 months after the disappearance, maintenance worker questioned in Hantseong University disappearance. Min-ah scanned the article quickly. Park Young-hwan, a 35-year-old maintenance worker who had been employed by the university for 7 years, had been brought in for questioning in connection with Jung Seo-yeon's disappearance. He had a minor criminal record, a harassment charge from several years prior, but there was no physical evidence linking him to Seo-yeon. He was released after 48 hours of questioning. Park Young-hwan, Min-ah repeated the name, sending a chill down her spine. "The man who killed her." "We don't know that he killed her," Ji-yoon pointed out. "The article just says he was questioned and released." "What happened to him after that?" Yoona asked, peering over Min-ah's shoulder at the article. Hae-won was already flipping through subsequent newspapers. "He resigned from the university a few months later. There's no further mention of him in any of these articles." Min-ah sat back, processing this information. "So, a maintenance worker with a history of harassment is questioned about a missing student, then resigns and disappears himself. That doesn't sound suspicious at all." "But if he did hurt her," Soo-yeon said carefully, "why would her spirit be attached to our room? The article says she disappeared from an exam hall on the other side of campus." Min-ah thought about the repaired section of wall behind the wardrobe, the tapping sounds that seemed to come from within. A horrible suspicion began to form in her mind. "What if she never left campus?" she said slowly. "What if he hid her somewhere no one would look?" A heavy silence fell over the group as the implication sank in. "You think she's in our wall?" Yoona whispered, face pale. That's... It would explain the tapping," Hae-won said, her academic mind already analyzing the possibility. "And why her spirit would be attached to that specific location." "But why now?" Ji-yoon asked. "Why, after 10 years, is she suddenly trying to communicate?" Min-ah didn't have an answer, but a sense of urgency was building within her. She felt certain that time was running out, though she couldn't have explained why. They gathered everything they could find about Jung Seo-yeon and Park Young-hwan, making photocopies of key articles. As they prepared to leave the library, Min-ah noticed a stack of university yearbooks from the mid-1990s and pulled one from the shelf on impulse. "Let's see if we can find a picture of her," she said, flipping through the pages until she reached the sophomore class photos. And there she was, Jung Seo-yeon, smiling softly at the camera, her long, dark hair framing a gentle face. She looked so ordinary, so alive, nothing like the spectral figure Min-ah had encountered in the stairwell. As Min-ah stared at the photograph, the page suddenly flipped as if caught by a breeze, except there was no draft in the windowless archives room. It turned to the faculty and staff section pages, riffling rapidly before stopping on a group photo of the maintenance department. And there in the back row stood a man labeled as Park Young-hwan, middle-aged, with a stern expression and piercing eyes. Min-ah gasped, the yearbook slipping from her fingers and thudding onto the table. "What is it?" Soo-yeon asked, alarmed by her reaction. "The man," Min-ah said, pointing to the photo. "I've seen him before, recently." The others gathered around, examining the image. "Where have you seen him?" Hae-won asked, studying the photograph. "He'd be much older now." Min-ah struggled to place the familiar face, then it hit her. "The new maintenance worker who started last month, the one who's always around our building. I thought he looked familiar, but I couldn't place it until now." "That's impossible," Ji-yoon said, shaking her head. "It can't be the same person. That would be too much of a coincidence." What was his name? Min-ah insisted, trying to remember. Park something. Park Jinwoo. The similarity in the name sent a collective shiver through the group. We need to report this, Soo-yeon said firmly. If there's even a chance, it's the same person the authorities need to know. Min-ah nodded, but doubt lingered. What would they tell the police? That they suspected a maintenance worker from 10 years ago had returned under a false name because a ghost told them he was a killer? They needed more evidence. As they left the library, the storm had finally begun to subside, leaving the campus shrouded in a misty half-light. They decided to stop at the campus cafe, needing food and a chance to process everything they'd learned. None of them mentioned returning to room 306, though Min-ah knew they would have to eventually. The cafe was busy with students seeking refuge from the rain, but they managed to find a table in the corner. As they sipped hot drinks and picked at sandwiches, Min-ah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She scanned the crowded room repeatedly, looking for a familiar face, but saw no one suspicious. "So, what's our next move?" Hae-won asked, keeping her voice low. "Do we go to security? The police? The housing office?" "We need proof," Min-ah replied. "Something concrete to show them, or they'll never believe us." "Like what?" Yuna asked. "A confession from a ghost." "Like evidence that Park Young-hwan and Park Jinwoo are the same person," Min-ah said, "and that he had something to do with Young Seo-yeon's disappearance." "And how do we get that?" Ji-yoon demanded. Min-ah hesitated, then voiced the thought that had been forming since they left the library. "We need to look behind that wall." Her friend stared at her in disbelief. "You want to tear down the wall of our dorm room?" Soo-yeon asked incredulously. "We'd be expelled." "Not tear it down," Min-ah clarified. "Just look behind it somehow. If there's really something or someone there, we need to know." "This is insane," Ji-yoon muttered, but she didn't outright refuse. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the cafe, reluctant to return to their room, but uncertain where else to go. As the day wore on, the rain stopped completely and weak sunlight began to break through the clouds. Somehow the prospect of returning to room 306 seemed less daunting in daylight. By the time they finally gathered the courage to head back to the Magnolia building, the sun was already beginning to set. The campus had largely emptied, most students having retreated to their dorms or apartments for the evening. As they approached their building, Min-ah spotted something that made her blood run cold. A maintenance van parked near the entrance, the university logo emblazoned on its side. "Look," she whispered, pulling the others behind a large oak tree. "Maintenance is here." "That could be anyone," Soo-yeon reasoned. "There are dozens of maintenance workers on campus." But Min-ah's instincts were screaming warnings. "Let's wait and see who comes out." They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, 2 men emerged from the building carrying toolboxes. One was young, probably in his 20s. The other was older, with graying hair at his temples, Park Jinwoo. The man Min-ah now suspected was actually Park Young-hwan. "That's him," she whispered, shrinking further behind the tree. "The older one." They watched as the men loaded their tools into the van. Before getting in, the older man paused, scanning the area around him as if checking whether he was being observed. His gaze passed over their hiding spot, and Min-ah held her breath until he finally turned away and climbed into the van. "What was he doing in our building?" Yuna asked as the van drove away. "Nothing good," Min-ah replied grimly. "Let's go see." The Magnolia building was quiet when they entered, most residents either still in classes or out for early dinner. They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, tension mounting with each step. When they reached room 306, they found the door closed, not partially open as they had left it. "Someone's been here," Soo-yeon murmured. Min-ah tried the handle. It turned easily. They entered cautiously, scanning the common room for any signs of disturbance. Everything appeared normal at first glance. But as they moved deeper into the room, Min-ah noticed something off about the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, a thin strip of light visible through the crack. "We left the light off," she whispered to the others. "Someone's turned it on." Heart pounding, she pushed the door open. The bedroom had been partially restored to order. The drawers put back into the dresser, the bedding straightened, books returned to shelves. But the message on the wall remained, the reddish-brown letters stark against the pale paint. And most significantly, the wardrobe had been moved several feet away from the wall. Behind where it had stood, the patch of newer plaster Mina had noticed earlier was now more obvious in the light, a rectangular section about 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall, extending from floor to ceiling. "He moved it," Mina said, approaching the wall. "Why would he move it if there's nothing to hide?" The others followed her into the room, staring at the wall with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. "Maybe he was just checking the plumbing or something," Ji-Yun suggested weakly. Mina shook her head, placing her palm against the newer section of wall. It felt different, colder than the surrounding area, with a slight give when she pressed against it. "There's something behind here. I'm sure of it." "Even if there is," Su-Yeon said, "we can't just break through the wall. We need professionals, authorities." "And what if they don't believe us?" Mina countered. "What if they think we're just hysterical students making up stories? By the time they take us seriously, he could destroy any evidence." As they debated their next move, the temperature in the room plummeted suddenly. Their breath clouded before them, and the light fixture overhead began to flicker rhythmically. "Not again," Yuna whispered, backing toward the door. The tapping sound returned louder than before, urgent, desperate. It wasn't coming from inside the wall this time, but from the floor beneath the wardrobe. Mina dropped to her knees, pressing her ear against the wooden floorboards. The tapping continued, along with what sounded like faint scratching. "There's something under the floor, too," she said, looking up at her friends with wide eyes. "Or someone." Before anyone could respond, a new sound filled the room, a soft, keening wail that seemed to emanate from the very air around them. It rose in pitch, transforming into words that all of them could hear clearly. "Find me, please find me, before he comes back." The light bulb overhead exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the room into semi-darkness. Yuna screamed, and even Su-Yeon, usually the calmest of them, let out a frightened gasp. "We're leaving," Ji-Yun announced, grabbing Yuna's arm. "Right now." "This is too much." "Wait," Mina pleaded, still kneeling on the floor. "We can't just leave. She needs our help. She's dead, Mina," Ji-Yun shouted, her composure finally breaking. "She's been dead for 10 years. There's nothing we can do for her now." "We can find her body," Mina insisted. "We can make sure Park Young-hwan pays for what he did." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the continued tapping from beneath the floor. "Okay," Haewon finally said. "Let's try something. Not breaking the wall, but maybe we can communicate with her directly, find out exactly what happened." "How?" Su-Yeon asked. Haewon bit her lip, then suggested, "My grandmother was very superstitious. She taught me how to make a spirit board like a Ouija board, but simpler." Under normal circumstances, the suggestion would have seemed ridiculous. But after everything they'd experienced, none of them dismissed it outright. "What do we need?" Mina asked. "Just paper, a marker, and something to use as a planchette. A glass or cup would work." They quickly gathered the materials, and Haewon created a makeshift spirit board on a large sheet of paper, writing letters, numbers, and simple responses like yes and no in a circle. In the center, she drew an eye symbol that her grandmother had taught her would help focus the energy. As night fell outside, they sat in a circle on the floor of the common room, the only illumination coming from a desk lamp they'd brought in from Su-Yeon's side of the bedroom. They placed their fingers lightly on an upturned water glass, positioned in the center of the paper. "Jung Seo-yeon," Haewon called softly. "If you're here, please communicate with us. We want to help you." For several long moments, nothing happened. The glass remained still beneath their fingertips. Mina was beginning to think this had been a foolish idea, when suddenly the temperature dropped sharply, and the glass began to move slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. It glided to the letter H, then E, then L, and P. "Help," Soo-yeon whispered, reading the message. "Jung Seo-yeon, what happened to you?" Min-ah asked, her voice trembling slightly. The glass moved again, spelling out Killed. "Who killed you?" Haewon prompted. "Park." They exchanged glances, their suspicions confirmed. "Where are you?" Min-ah asked. "Where did he hide you?" The glass circled the board restlessly, then spelled Wall. "In the wall," Ji-eun clarified, her skepticism fading in the face of this eerie communication. The glass moved again, Wall and then Floor. "She's in the wall and under the floor," Min-ah interpreted, remembering the tapping sounds from both locations. "How is that possible?" As if in answer, the glass spelled out Piecess. Yuna let out a choked sob and removed her fingers from the glass. "I can't do this," she whispered, scrambling to her feet. "This is too horrible." The glass continued to move, now more erratically. Comingback. "Park is coming back," Minna asked, her heart racing. "Yes. Why after all this time? Youknow?" Before they could ask what that meant, the glass suddenly shot across the room, shattering against the wall. The paper with the spirit board burst into flames, forcing them to jump back as it curled and blackened. "What the hell?" Ji-eun gasped, staring at the smoldering remains of the paper. A cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the desk lamp and plunging them into darkness. In the silence that followed, they could hear soft footsteps moving from the common room toward their bedroom. Minna fumbled for her phone, remembering too late that it was dead. "Does anyone have a light?" she whispered. No one did. They huddled together in the darkness, listening as the footsteps stopped in the bedroom. Then came the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor, the wardrobe being moved. "He's in our room," Soo-yeon breathed, barely audible. "We need to get out," Haewon replied, inching toward where she knew the door to be. But Minna felt frozen in place, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't explain. "I need to see," she whispered. "I need to know what he's doing." "Minna, no," Ji-eun hissed, but it was too late. Minna was already moving toward the bedroom, guided by an instinct that seemed to come from outside herself. She reached the doorway and peered inside. The room was dark, but she could make out a figure crouched near the wall where the wardrobe had stood. A flashlight beam illuminated a section of the floor, revealing that one of the floorboards had been pried up. The figure, Park Young-hwan, she was certain was reaching into the space beneath, retrieving something. Minna strained to see what it was, leaning slightly further into the doorway. The floorboard beneath her foot creaked. The figure froze, then slowly turned the flashlight in her direction. For a moment the beam blinded her, and then she was looking into the face of Park Young-hwan, older than in the yearbook photo, but unmistakably the same man. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice rough and threatening. Minna couldn't move, couldn't speak. The flashlight beam lowered slightly, and she saw what he held in his other hand, a small cloth bag stained dark. "You shouldn't be here," he said, rising to his feet. "No one should be here." Minna finally found her voice. "We know what you did to Jung Seo-yeon." He stilled the flashlight beam, steadying on her face. "You don't know anything," he replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "We know she's here," Minna continued, surprising herself with her boldness. "In the wall, under the floor. We know you killed her and hid her body." For a long moment he said nothing, the silence stretching between them like a live wire. Then, with frightening suddenness, he lunged toward her. Minna stumbled backward into the common room, colliding with her friends who had crept closer to the door. "Run!" she screamed, pushing them toward the exit. They fled into the hallway, hearing Park's heavy footsteps behind them. As they raced toward the stairwell, Minna glanced back and saw him standing in the doorway of room 306, watching them with cold, calculating eyes. They didn't stop running until they reached the campus security office, bursting through the door and startling the officer on duty. "There's an intruder in our room," Soo-yeon gasped, the first to catch her breath. "Magnolia Building, room 306. The officer rose, immediately reaching for his radio. Is he armed? We don't think so, Minna replied, but he's dangerous. And he's not an intruder, he's a maintenance worker. Park Jin-woo. Except that's not his real name. The security officer looked confused but continued to radio for backup. Within minutes, 2 more officers had arrived and they took preliminary statements from the women before heading to the Magnolia building to investigate. Left alone in the security office, the 5 friends collapsed into chairs, the adrenaline that had carried them there beginning to ebb. "Do you think they'll find him?" Yuna asked, her voice small. "I doubt it," Minna replied. "He's had 10 years to practice disappearing." "What do we tell them?" Ji-Yun asked. "About Young Seo-yeon, I mean. They'll think we're crazy if we say a ghost told us she's hidden in our wall." "We tell them the truth," Min-ah said firmly. "That we found evidence suggesting Park Young-hwan, who was questioned in her disappearance, has returned to campus under a false name. That we have reason to believe he hid her remains in our room." And when they ask how we know that, Soo-yeon challenged. Minna had no good answer. Hours later, after giving their statements to campus security, and then to police officers who had been called to the scene, they were told that Park Jin-woo was nowhere to be found. A search of room 306 had revealed nothing suspicious, though one officer admitted that the section of wall behind the wardrobe did appear to have been repaired at some point. "We'll need a warrant to do any further investigation," the detective in charge explained. "Opening up walls isn't something we can do without proper authorization." They were assigned temporary accommodations in another dormitory while the investigation continued. As they walked across campus to their new rooms, Minna felt a heaviness settling over her, a sense of failure. They had been so close to discovering the truth, to finding Young Seo-yeon and bringing her killer to justice. "This isn't over," she told the others as they prepared to separate for the night. "I'm not giving up." The others exchanged uncertain glances. "Minna," Soo-yeon said gently, "maybe we should let the police handle it from here. This is dangerous and we're just students." "The police didn't find her 10 years ago," Min-ah replied. "Why would they find her now unless we push them?" No one had an answer for that. Min-ah's temporary room was a single on the first floor of the Willow Building, a newer dormitory across campus. After saying goodnight to her friend, she entered the unfamiliar space feeling adrift and alone. She hadn't brought any belongings with her. Everything was still in room 306, which was now considered a potential crime scene. The housing office had provided basic necessities, a toothbrush, toiletries, a university t-shirt to sleep in. Exhausted beyond measure, Min-ah collapsed onto the bed without bothering to change or wash up. Sleep came almost instantly, dragging her into uneasy dreams filled with tapping sounds and whispered pleas for help. She woke with a start at 3:17 a.m., the digital clock on the nightstand casting a red glow across the unfamiliar room. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was or what had woken her. Then she felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the room's temperature, a heaviness in the air that made it difficult to breathe. Min-ah sat up slowly, the hairs on the back of her neck rising. She wasn't alone. She could feel a presence beside her on the bed, though she couldn't yet see it in the darkness. A soft indentation in the mattress, as if someone or something had settled there while she slept. The air near that spot seemed to shimmer slightly, a distortion that caught the dim red light from the clock. Heart pounding, Min-ah reached for the bedside lamp. Her fingers fumbled with the switch, finally clicking it on. The light revealed what her other senses had already detected. There was someone in bed with her lying on their side face, hidden beneath the blanket. The shape was unmistakably human, eerily still beneath the thin dormitory comforter. Min-ah's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't scream, couldn't move, could only stare at the motionless figure beside her. With trembling fingers, she reached for the edge of the blanket. Some part of her mind screamed at her to run, to flee the room and never look back. But a stronger compulsion drove her forward. She grasped the edge of the comforter and slowly, inch by inch, pulled it back. The face that was revealed stopped her heart for a beat. Jung Seo-yeon, but not as she had appeared in the yearbook photo. This Jung Seo-yeon was a corpse, skin gray-blue and sunken against bone eyes, hollow black pits in a face that had begun to decompose. Her neck bore a deep, jagged wound that gaped like a second mouth crusted with dried blood and something darker. Mina tried to scream, but no sound emerged. She was frozen, trapped in a nightmare-made flesh. Then impossibly, the corpse's eyes shifted, focusing on Mina with terrible awareness. The ruined lips parted and the gash in her throat widened as Jung Seo-yeon began to speak. The wound on Jung Seo-yeon's neck pulsed like a living entity as words emerged her voice, a ragged whisper that seemed to emanate not from her ruined throat but from the very air around them. "He's coming back!" she rasped, dark fluid seeping from the jagged gash with each syllable. "He knows you've discovered me. He won't let you live." Mina's paralysis broke and she scrambled backward until her spine pressed against the headboard as far from the corpse as the small bed would allow. "How are you here?" she managed to ask, her voice a strangled whisper. "This isn't room 306. The corpse's head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if the neck could no longer properly support it. "I'm bound to you now. You touched my belongings. You spoke my name. You sought my truth." The black pits that had once been eyes seemed to bore into Mina's soul. "I've been waiting 10 years for someone to find me." Mina forced herself to breathe, to think rationally despite the horror before her. "What happened to you? Tell me everything so we can help you." Jung Seo-yeon's dead lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth darkened by decay. "I left my exam to use the restroom. He was waiting in the hallway, Park Jung-hwan. He'd been watching me for weeks, leaving notes in my books, following me across campus." Her voice took on a distant quality, as if reciting events that had happened to someone else. "He grabbed me before I could scream, covered my mouth with a cloth that smelled sweet. When I woke up, I was in room 306. "But why that room?" Mina asked, struggling to understand. "Did you live there?" "No, he did." The corpse's chest expanded with what might have been a sigh. "The university provided housing for certain maintenance staff back then. The Magnolia Building's 3rd floor was converted to student housing the year after I died. Before that, it was staff quarters." Mina's mind raced, putting pieces together. "So he killed you in his own room." The spectral figure nodded the movement, causing something to shift audibly in her broken neck. "He kept me there for days, did things. Then when he finished, he cut my throat." Her skeletal hand rose to touch the wound fingers, probing the gaping flesh. "He couldn't risk moving my body off campus, so he dismembered me." Mina felt bile rise in her throat, but forced it down. She needed to hear this, needed to understand. "He hid parts of me in the wall, others beneath the floorboards. Then he plastered over the wall, replaced the floorboards with new ones, and pushed the wardrobe in front to hide his work." The corpse's voice hardened. "The police questioned him. They knew he had been stalking female students, but they never searched his room. Why would they? No one knew I'd been there." "And now he's back," Mina whispered, remembering the man they'd confronted in their room. "Park Jin-woo is Park Jung-hwan." "Yes, he returned when he heard about renovations planned for the Magnolia Building. He feared they would discover my remains during construction." A horrifying thought struck Mina. "You said parts of you were hidden. What was in the bag he took tonight?" The corpse's face contorted in what might have been anguish. "My hand. The one with my mother's ring still on it." "He's removing evidence piece by piece." Mina felt sick. The full weight of what they'd stumbled into pressed down on her like a physical force. This wasn't just a ghost story or a decades-old mystery. It was an active cover-up by a killer who now knew they were on to him. "I need to tell the others," she said, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. "We need to call the police again, make them understand." "They won't believe you," Jung Seo-yeon replied, her voice fading slightly. Not without proof. Then we'll get proof. Min-Ah's fingers trembled as she tried to turn on her phone, but the screen remained dark, the battery still dead. She looked up to find Young Seo-yeon's corpse watching her with those hollow eye sockets, a terrible understanding passing between them. "He'll destroy everything before they find it," the ghost said, "unless you stop him." "Me? How can I stop him? He's a killer." "You're not alone," Young Seo-yeon reminded her. "You have your friends." "And you have me?" As if on cue, Min-Ah's phone suddenly flickered to life, the battery indicator showing full charge, though it had been dead moments before. She stared at it in disbelief, then back at Young Seo-yeon. "I can't do much in your world," the ghost explained, "but small things, electricity, cold spots, whispers, these I can manage." Min-Ah didn't question the impossibility of what was happening. After everything she'd witnessed, a ghost charging her phone seemed almost mundane. She quickly texted her friends asking them to meet her in Soo-yeon's temporary room immediately. By the time she arrived at Soo-yeon's door, shivering in the pre-dawn chill, the others were already there. They looked as exhausted as Min-Ah felt, with dark circles under their eyes and drawn expressions. "This better be important," Ji-yoon muttered, hugging herself against the cold. "It's 4 a.m. "Young Seo-yeon came to me," Min-Ah said without preamble, "in my room. She told me everything." She quickly relayed what the ghost had revealed about Park Jung-hwan's room, the murder, the dismemberment, and his return to remove evidence. "Wait," Hae-won interrupted her analytical mind, latching onto a crucial detail. "If room 306 was his quarters, and he hid her there in 1995, there should be maintenance records, housing assignments from that time. We could prove he lived there." "That's what we need," Min-Ah agreed. "Concrete evidence to take to the police." "The housing office would have those records," Soo-yeon said, "but they won't open until 9, and they certainly won't share confidential staff records with students." "Then we find another way," Min-Ah insisted. "The maintenance department must keep employment records, too." "The basement of the administration building," Yuna said suddenly. They all turned to look at her, surprised. "I worked in HR last semester. They keep archived personnel files in storage rooms in the basement. Even old paper records from before everything went digital." "Can you get us in?" Min-Ah asked. Yuna hesitated. "Maybe. I still have my access card, but it's in our room, in the Magnolia building." "We need to go back there anyway," Min-Ah said grimly. "The police may have searched, but they didn't know exactly what to look for. We do." "You want to break into a crime scene?" Ji-yoon asked incredulously. "Are you insane?" "It's still our room," Min-Ah argued. "And if we wait for the police to figure this out, Park Jung-hwan will have removed all the evidence." They debated for several minutes, weighing risks against the urgency of the situation. Finally, Soo-yeon spoke up, her quiet voice cutting through the argument. "What if he's waiting for us there?" she asked. "What if that's exactly what he wants for us to come back?" A heavy silence fell over the group. "Then we need to be smarter than him," Min-Ah replied finally. "We need a plan." As dawn broke over the campus, they finalized their strategy. Yuna and Hae-won would go to the administration building to search for personnel records, while Min-Ah, Soo-yeon, and Ji-yoon would return to the Magnolia building to retrieve Yuna's access card and search for any remaining evidence Park might have missed. "We stay together," Min-Ah emphasized. "No one goes anywhere alone, and we keep our phones on at all times." They agreed to meet back at Soo-yeon's room in 2 hours, regardless of what they found. If any group encountered trouble, they would call campus security immediately. The morning was crisp and clear, the storm having fully passed, leaving behind puddles that reflected the pale blue sky. Few students were out this early on a Saturday, giving the campus an eerie, abandoned quality that did nothing to calm Minna's nerves. As they approached the Magnolia building, Minna felt a familiar coldness settle over her, unrelated to the autumn chill. She glanced at Su-yeon and Ji-yun, wondering if they felt it too, that sensation of being watched, of walking into a trap. "Police tape," Ji-yun murmured as they neared the entrance. Yellow crime scene tape crossed the main doors, a clear warning against entry. "There's a side entrance," Min-ah replied. "The one the RAs use when they lock themselves out. It's never properly secured." She led them around the building to a small door, partially hidden by overgrown shrubs. As she had predicted, it opened with minimal resistance. The lock was old and had never been replaced, despite numerous complaints from residents. The building was unnervingly quiet as they slipped inside, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Most residents had been temporarily relocated after the previous night's events, leaving the normally bustling dormitory feeling like a ghost town. They climbed the stairs cautiously, pausing at each landing to listen for any sounds that might indicate they weren't alone. By the time they reached the third floor, Min-ah's heart was pounding so loudly she was sure the others could hear it. Room 306's door was sealed with more police tape, an official notice warning against entry affixed beside the handle. Min-ah hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Breaking this seal was a crime. They could face serious consequences. "We can still turn back," Su-yeon whispered, seeming to read her thoughts. Min-ah shook her head. "No, we need to know." With a deep breath, she carefully peeled back the tape, preserving it as best she could so they could replace it when they left. The door was unlocked, the police having secured it with the tape alone, and swung open at her touch. The suite looked exactly as they had left it the night before, down to the remains of the charred spirit board paper on the common room floor. Min-ah headed straight for their bedroom, Su-yeon and Ji-yun close behind. The wardrobe had been moved back against the wall, but the section of floor Park had been examining was still exposed. The floorboard pried up and leaning against the wall. Min-ah knelt beside the opening, peering into the darkness beneath. "Flashlight," she whispered, and Su-yeon handed her a small pocket light they'd brought for this purpose. Min-ah directed the beam into the cavity beneath the floor. At first she saw nothing but dust and old wiring. Then as she adjusted the angle, the light caught something, a dull gleam of metal half buried in the dirt. "There's something down there," she said, her voice tight. "I need to reach in." "Be careful," Ji-yun warned, kneeling beside her. Min-ah steeled herself and plunged her arm into the opening, feeling blindly in the direction where she'd seen the metallic glint. Her fingers brushed against something cold and hard, and she grabbed it, withdrawing her hand quickly. It was a small locket tarnished with age and crusted with dirt. Min-ah carefully pried it open. Inside was a tiny photograph, faded but still recognizable, of a young Young Seo-yeon smiling at the camera. "It's hers," Min-ah whispered, showing the others. "This is proof she was here." Encouraged by this discovery, they continued searching. Ji-yun found Yuna's access card in her desk drawer, while Su-yeon examined the patched section of wall behind the wardrobe more closely. "Look at this," she called, pointing to a small area where the plaster had crumbled slightly. "You can see the edge of something inside." Min-ah joined her, shining the flashlight on the spot. Through the crumbling plaster, she could just make out what looked like fabric, a scrap of faded blue material. "That could be her clothing," Min-ah said. "We need to document everything before we leave." They used their phones to take photos of each discovery, the exposed floorboard, the locket, the fabric visible through the wall. As Min-ah was photographing the locket, a sound from the common room made them all freeze, the unmistakable creak of the front door opening. Min-ah quickly switched off the flashlight, plunging the room into semi-darkness. They huddled together, barely breathing, as footsteps moved through the common room, heavy, deliberate steps that could not belong to Yuna or Haewon. "It's him," Ji-yun mouthed silently, eyes wide with terror. Min-ah's mind raced. There was no other exit from the bedroom except through the common room. They were trapped. The footsteps paused, then resumed, heading directly toward the bedroom door. Min-ah glanced frantically around the room, searching for a weapon, a hiding place, anything. Her eyes fell on the window, their only chance. She gestured urgently to the others, pointing toward the window that overlooked the fire escape. Soo-yeon nodded in understanding and began moving silently in that direction. The bedroom door creaked open. Mina turned hard in her throat to see Park Young-hwan standing in the doorway. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, his face was half in shadow, but the coldness of his gaze was unmistakable. In his hand was a large hammer, the kind used for demolition work. "I knew you'd come back," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "They always come back to the scene of the crime." Mina stepped forward, placing herself between Park and her friends. "The only crime here is what you did to Jung Seo-yeon," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "We know everything about how you kept her here, killed her, hid her body in your room." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps that they knew so much. Then his expression hardened. "You know nothing," he said, advancing into the room. "And soon you'll be nothing." He lunged toward Mina with unexpected speed. She dodged, but not quickly enough. The hammer caught her shoulder, sending a jolt of pain down her arm. She staggered backward, colliding with the desk. "Run!" she screamed to the others, who were already scrambling for the window. Soo-yeon was the first to reach it, wrestling with the old sticky latch. Ji-yoon joined her, their combined strength finally forcing it open with a screech of rusted metal. Park turned to the sound, momentarily distracted from Mina. It was the opportunity she needed. She grabbed the desk lamp and swung it with all her strength, connecting with the side of Park's head. He stumbled, momentarily dazed, and Mina darted past him toward the window. Soo-yeon was already on the fire escape, helping Ji-yoon through the window. Mina could hear Park recovering behind her, his heavy breathing and shuffling footsteps growing closer. "Hurry," Soo-yeon urged, reaching back through the window to grab Mina's arm. Mina was halfway through the opening when she felt a vice-like grip on her ankle. Park had caught up to her, his face contorted with rage, the hammer raised for another strike. She kicked frantically, her free foot connecting with his face. He grunted in pain but didn't release his hold. "Help me," she cried to her friends on the fire escape. Ji-yoon and Soo-yeon each grabbed one of her arms, pulling with all their strength. For a moment, Mina felt suspended between two forces, her body the rope in a deadly tug-of-war. Then, with a final desperate kick, she broke free of Park's grasp and tumbled onto the metal grating of the fire escape. They didn't wait to see if Park would follow. The three of them raced down the rickety structure, metal clanging beneath their feet. Mina's shoulder throbbed where the hammer had struck her, and she could feel something warm trickling down her arm blood from where her skin had split on impact. As they reached the bottom of the fire escape, they heard a crash from above. Park had thrown something through the window in his rage, sending glass shards raining down. They ducked under the fire escape for protection, then sprinted across the open space between buildings, heading for the main campus thoroughfare, where others would be around. "Call security," Mina gasped as they ran fumbling for her phone. Ji-yoon already had hers out, panting as she dialed. "Campus security. There's an intruder in Magnolia Building Room 306. He just attacked us with a hammer. It's Park Jin-woo, the maintenance worker. Please hurry." They didn't stop running until they reached the central plaza, where early morning joggers and students heading to weekend study sessions provided safety in numbers. Collapsing onto a bench, they struggled to catch their breath. Mina winced as she examined her shoulder. The fabric of her shirt was torn, revealing an angry red welt that was already beginning to bruise, with a small cut in the center where the edge of the hammer had broken the skin. "That needs medical attention," Soo-yeon said, looking at the injury with concern. "Later," Mina replied, pulling out her phone. "We need to warn Yuna and Hae-won first." She dialed Hae-won's number, relieved when her friend answered immediately. "We were attacked," Mina said without preamble. "Park Young-hwan was waiting for us in the room. Are you two safe?" "We're fine," Hae-won assured her, her voice hushed. "We're in the archives room now. And Mina, we founded employment records confirming Park Young-hwan was assigned to room 306 in 1995. We also found complaints filed against him by female students for harassment, including one from Jung Seo-yeon just weeks before she disappeared. Min-ah felt a surge of hope. That's exactly what we need. We found physical evidence too, a locket under the floorboards and what looks like fabric in the wall. We documented everything. Campus security is heading to the Magnolia building now, Ji-yeon added, looking up from her own phone. And I called the detective who interviewed us yesterday. He's meeting us at the security office in 20 minutes. They arranged a rendezvous with Yuna and Hae-won at the security office, then made their way there on shaky legs, constantly checking over their shoulders for any sign of Park. Min-ah clutched Jung Seo-yeon's locket tightly in her hand, the small piece of metal their strongest physical link to the missing student. By the time they reached the security office, a small crowd had gathered outside the Magnolia building. Campus security officers had cordoned off the area, and a police car was parked at the entrance. Inside the security office, they found Yuna and Hae-won already waiting along with Detective Kang, the officer who had interviewed them the previous day. His skeptical expression had been replaced by one of grave concern as he examined the photocopied personnel records. "You girls have been busy," he remarked, looking up as Min-ah Soo-yeon and Ji-yeon entered. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Min-ah's injured shoulder. "You need medical attention." "After you hear what we found," Min-ah insisted, placing the locket on the desk before him. "This belonged to Jung Seo-yeon. It was hidden beneath the floor in room 306, the room assigned to Park Young-hwan in 1995. Detective Kang picked up the locket, carefully examining it. "And you're certain this belonged to the missing student?" "Open it," Min-ah urged. He did, revealing the faded photograph inside. His expression changed as he recognized the face, the same one from missing person posters that had papered the campus a decade ago. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked, his tone now deadly serious. Min-ah described the loose floorboard, the fabric visible in the wall, and their confrontation with Park Young-hwan. As she spoke, the detective's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, then hung up with a grim expression. "That was the team at the Magnolia building," he said. "Park Jin-woo, or Young-hwan, whatever his real name is gone, but they found something else. When they examined the area of floor you described, they discovered human remains, bone fragments to be exact." A collective gasp went through the group. "We're bringing in a forensic team now," Detective Kang continued. "The entire building is being evacuated, and the investigation has been upgraded to a potential homicide." He looked directly at Min-ah. "We'll need formal statements from all of you, but first you need medical attention, and the rest of you should get some rest. This is now an active police investigation." Min-ah shook her head. "You don't understand. He's still out there and he knows we found him out. We're not safe." "We'll assign officers to protect you," Detective Kang assured her. "But right now the priority is securing the crime scene and finding Park." As they were escorted to the campus medical center, Min-ah couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Jung Seo-yeon's ghost had appeared to her for a reason, had chosen her as the vessel for her decade-old cry for justice. And somehow Min-ah knew that until Jung Seo-yeon's remains were properly found and laid to rest, the haunting would continue. At the medical center, a nurse cleaned and bandaged Min-ah's shoulder while the others waited in the adjoining room. The injury wasn't serious. The hammer had struck her with the flat side rather than the edge, but it would leave an impressive bruise. "You're lucky," the nurse remarked as she applied the last piece of tape to the bandage. "This could have been much worse." Min-ah nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Jung Seo-yeon's words. "He won't let you live." Park Young-hwan had evaded justice for 10 years. He wouldn't give up easily now. When the nurse left to retrieve some painkillers, Min-ah was startled by a sudden drop in temperature. Her breath clouded before her face, and the examination room light flickered erratically. "Seo-yeon," she whispered. The air in the corner of the room shimmered, coalescing into the now familiar figure of Jung Seo-yeon's ghost. She appeared less decayed this time, almost solid, as if gathering strength. "He's still in the building," she said without preamble, her voice urgent. "Your building. The new one they moved you to." "He's waiting!" Minna felt her blood run cold. "For me. For all of you." The ghost's form wavered like a television with poor reception. "He knows what you found. He won't stop until you're silenced." "The police are looking for him," Minna said, trying to reassure herself as much as the spirit. "They found bone fragments in the floor. They believe us now." "It's not enough," Jung Seo-yeon insisted, her form becoming more transparent with each passing second. "He's destroyed most of the evidence over the years. Without a confession, without more remains, he might still escape justice." "What can I do?" Minna asked desperately as the ghost began to fade. "Bring him back to room 306 inches. Jung Seo-yeon's voice was barely audible now. "It's where I died. It's where I'm strongest. It's where I can help you end this." Before Minna could ask how exactly she was supposed to lure a murderer back to a room now crawling with police, the ghost vanished completely, leaving only a lingering chill in the air. The nurse returned oblivious to the supernatural encounter that had just taken place. "These should help with the pain," she said, handing Minna 2 small pills. "And you should really get some rest." Minna thanked her and rejoined her friends in the waiting room. They looked exhausted, dark circles under their eyes, their postures slumped with fatigue and stress. "The doctor says you should all get some sleep," a campus security officer told them as they exited the medical center. "We've arranged for new temporary housing in the Cypress building. Officers will be stationed in the hallway for your protection." Minna exchanged glances with her friends, silently communicating her new information. Once they were alone in the security vehicle transporting them to their new accommodations, she told them about Jung Seo-yeon's warning. "So he's waiting for us at the Willow building?" Haewon asked, horrified. "Where we were supposed to be staying?" "Yes, but now we're being taken to the Cypress building instead," Minna replied, "which means we're safe for now." "But for how long?" Ji-hoon asked. "This man has evaded capture for 10 years. He clearly knows his way around campus probably better than the security officers." "Jung Seo-yeon says we need to lure him back to room 306 inches, Minna continued. "She says it's where she's strongest, where she can help us." "Help us how?" Soo-yeon asked skeptically. "She's a ghost, Minna. What can she do against a living, breathing killer?" Minna remembered how the spirit had charged her dead phone, how she had made lights flicker and temperatures drop. "I don't know exactly," she admitted, "but I trust her." "She wants justice as much as we do? Even if we wanted to do this, which I'm not saying we do," Ji-hoon emphasized, "how would we get past the police and security now swarming the Magnolia building?" It was a valid question and one Minna didn't have an immediate answer for. But as they pulled up to the Cypress building, a new dormitory on the north side of campus, an idea began to form. "We need to split up," she said finally as they were escorted into the building. "What? No way," Yuna protested. "That's literally what you said not to do this morning." "Not physically split up," Minna clarified. "I mean, we need to create a diversion. Make Park think some of us are vulnerable while setting a trap for him." They were shown to their new rooms, 2 doubles for the 5 of them to share. Once the security officers had stationed themselves at the end of the hallway, they gathered in one room to discuss Minna's plan. "It's too dangerous," Soo-yeon argued after hearing Minna's idea. "We should let the police handle this." "The police haven't found him yet," Minna pointed out. "And meanwhile, he's hunting us. We need to take control of the situation." They debated back and forth, weighing risks against the very real danger of doing nothing. Finally, Haewon spoke up. "I think Minna's right," she said quietly. "Park knows this campus intimately. He could evade the police for days, all while trying to get to us. If we can end this on our terms in a controlled environment with security nearby." It's still insane, Ji-yoon muttered, but her objection lacked conviction. By late afternoon, they had formulated a plan. Using their inside knowledge of the campus and the connection Min-ah seemed to have established with Jung Seo-yeon's ghost, they would set a trap for Park Young-hwan, bringing him back to room 306, where hopefully Jung Seo-yeon could help them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. As dusk fell, casting long shadows across the campus, Min-ah stood at the window of their temporary room, staring in the direction of the Magnolia Building. Somewhere out there, Park Young-hwan was watching, waiting for his opportunity. And somewhere in between, Jung Seo-yeon's restless spirit awaited justice. "It ends tonight," Min-ah whispered to herself, Jung Seo-yeon's locket clutched tightly in her palm. One way or another. The temperature dropped suddenly, a familiar chill that had nothing to do with the autumn evening. Min-ah didn't need to turn around to know that Jung Seo-yeon was with her, a silent witness to her determination. "I'll help you find peace," Min-ah promised the unseen presence. "Whatever it takes." As if in response, the lights in the room flickered once, then stabilized. A sign of acknowledgement, perhaps, or a warning of the supernatural forces they were about to unleash. Either way, there was no turning back now. 3 weeks passed since that fateful night when they had confronted Park Young-hwan in room 306. The Magnolia Building stood silent and empty now, cordoned off with police tape as forensic teams continued their meticulous work. Day by day they uncovered more of Jung Seo-yeon's remains. Bone fragments embedded in the wall, strands of hair preserved beneath floorboards, teeth hidden in ceiling cavities, a macabre jigsaw puzzle of a young woman who had been dead for a decade. Min-ah sat alone on a bench overlooking the central plaza, autumn leaves swirling around her feet. The bruise on her shoulder had faded from angry purple to a dull yellowish green, but the memories remained as vivid as ever. She couldn't close her eyes without seeing Park Young-hwan's face contorted with rage or the hollow eyes of Jung Seo-yeon's spectral form pleading for justice. Their plan had worked, though, not in the way any of them had anticipated. Using themselves as bait, they had lured Park back to room 306. The police had been waiting hidden throughout the building. But in the end, it wasn't the authorities who had stopped him. It was Jung Seo-yeon herself. Min-ah remembered every detail of that night. How the temperature had plummeted when Park entered the room. How the doors had slammed shut of their own accord, trapping him inside. How the lights had exploded in showers of glass, plunging the room into darkness, broken only by impossible flashes of cold blue light. And most vividly she remembered Park's face when Jung Seo-yeon had manifested before him, not as the decomposed corpse Min-ah had seen, but as she had appeared in life, beautiful and terrible in her rage. The killer had screamed a sound that still haunted Min-ah's dreams as he backed away from the apparition until he tripped over the exposed floorboard and fell, striking his head against the corner of the desk with sickening force. By the time police burst into the room, Park Young-hwan lay unconscious, blood pooling beneath his head. Jung Seo-yeon had vanished, her presence lingering only in the unnatural cold that permeated the room. Park had survived barely. He remained in the hospital now under police guard, his skull fractured in 2 places. The doctors weren't sure if he would ever regain full cognitive function, but it hardly mattered. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Beyond the physical remains found in room 306, investigators had discovered a storage unit rented under one of his aliases containing trophies from Jung Seo-yeon and other victims, 3 more young women who had disappeared from different universities across the country over the past decade. Each time, Park had secured maintenance positions, gained access to residential buildings, and repeated his horrific pattern. "Mind if I join you?" Min-ah looked up to see Soo-yeon standing before her 2 paper cups of coffee in hand. She smiled weakly and patted the space beside her on the bench. "How are you holding up?" Soo-yeon asked, passing Min-ah one of the coffees. "Better, I think," Min-ah replied, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm cup. The nightmares are less frequent now. Soo-yeon nodded in understanding. All 5 of them had been deeply affected by what they'd experienced, but Min-ah most of all. She had been the one with the strongest connection to Jung Seo-yeon's spirit, the one who had seen her most clearly, heard her most directly. "Have you heard about the memorial service?" Soo-yeon asked after a moment of companionable silence. "Yes, Sunday at 2. Jung Seo-yeon's family had finally been given enough of their daughter's remains for a proper burial. After 10 years of uncertainty, they could at last say goodbye." "Will you attend?" Min-ah nodded. "I feel like I should, like I owe it to her." "We'll all go with you," Soo-yeon assured her. "We're in this together, remember? Together." The word brought both comfort and unease. Their shared experience had forged a bond between them that no one else could understand. But Min-ah sometimes wondered if that bond was entirely positive. They had been touched by something beyond normal human experience, and she couldn't help feeling it had left a mark on them, invisible perhaps, but indelible. "How are the new rooms?" Min-ah asked, changing the subject. After the events in the Magnolia building, the university had relocated them to permanent housing in different dormitories. Min-ah alone had requested a single room, unable to bear the thought of having anyone else sleeping nearby. "They're fine. Nothing special." Soo-yeon hesitated, then asked the question Min-ah knew was coming. "Have you seen her again since that night?" Min-ah stared into her coffee. "No, not really." It wasn't entirely true. She hadn't seen Jung Seo-yeon's full manifestation again, but there had been incidents. Moments when she'd catch a glimpse of something in a mirror or a window reflection, a figure standing behind her who vanished when she turned around. Cold spots that appeared in her room on otherwise warm days. The sensation of being watched while she slept. But she didn't tell Soo-yeon these things. Her friends had begun to move on, to normalize their lives. Min-ah didn't want to drag them back into the darkness that still seemed to cling to her. "That's good," Soo-yeon said, relief evident in her voice. "Maybe she's found peace now that they've found her remains and Park has been caught." "Maybe," Min-ah agreed, though she didn't believe it. Jung Seo-yeon had unfinished business, she was certain of it. The question was what that business might be. Later that evening, Min-ah returned to her new room in the Willow Building on the opposite side of campus from the now shuttered Magnolia. It was a pleasant space, recently renovated, with nothing of the musty, forgotten quality that had permeated their old suite. Yet she couldn't feel at home here. It felt temporary, transitional, as if she were merely passing through. She set her bag down on the desk and froze. On her bed lay a small white envelope that hadn't been there when she left that morning. With trembling fingers she picked it up. Her name was written on the front in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and as she unfolded it, something fell onto her bedspread, a small silver key. The note was brief, Min-ah. "There are things you should know. Things about Jung Seo-yeon, about Park Young-hwan, about what happened 10 years ago. Things the police haven't discovered. If you want the truth, come to the old records building behind the library tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. Bring the key." Someone who knows Min-ah stared at the note, her heart pounding. Who could have left this? How had they gotten into her locked room? And most importantly, what did they know that she didn't? She thought about calling the others, telling them about the note. They would insist on coming with her, or more likely try to convince her not to go at all. But something deep inside told her this was meant for her alone. The next day passed in a blur of classes and study sessions, the note burning a hole in her pocket. As midnight approached, Minna found herself standing outside the old records building, a small brick structure that had once housed the university archives before they were moved to the new library. Now it stood mostly abandoned, used occasionally for overflow storage. The night was clear and cold stars glittering overhead. Campus was quiet, most students already in their dorms or apartments. Minna glanced around, seeing no one watching, then approached the building. The main entrance was locked with a heavy padlock, the kind the small silver key would fit perfectly. With shaking hands, she inserted the key. It turned smoothly, the padlock clicking open. Minna removed it and pushed the door open, wincing at the creak of hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. Inside, the air was stale and dusty. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes of old files and forgotten documents. A thin beam of moonlight filtered through a high window, casting more shadows than illumination. "Hello," Minna called softly, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Is anyone here?" No answer came. She took a few tentative steps forward, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight. In the center of the room stood a single desk, and on it, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight, lay a thick folder. Minna approached cautiously, alert for any sign of danger. The folder was labeled simply, "Jung Seo-yeon, Confidential." She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were documents she hadn't seen before, police reports that had been kept from the public, photographs from the original investigation, handwritten notes from detectives. And most disturbing of all, a list of names female students who had reported being followed or harassed in the months before Seo-yeon's disappearance. At the bottom of the list, circled in red pen, was a name that made Minna's blood freeze: Park Min-ji, her mother's name. Minna staggered back from the desk, the implications crashing over her like a tidal wave. Her mother had been a student at Hauntings University 20 years ago. Had she known Park Young-hwan? Had she been one of his targets? A soft sound behind her made Minna whirl around. For a moment she thought she saw a figure standing in the shadows by the door, not Jung Seo-yeon, but someone else, someone solid and real. But when she blinked, the figure was gone, the doorway empty. Heart-pounding, Minna gathered the folder and hurried from the building, locking it behind her. As she rushed back to her dorm, clutching the documents to her chest, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had been led here for a reason, that there was a connection between her family and Jung Seo-yeon that went deeper than coincidence. That night, as she lay in bed after hours of poring over the documents, Minna finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. She dreamed of Jung Seo-yeon, not as the corpse that had appeared to her before, but as the vibrant young woman from the photographs. In the dream, Seo-yeon was trying to tell her something important, her lips moving urgently, but no sound came out. Minna awoke with a start at precisely 3:17 a.m., the same time Jung Seo-yeon had first appeared to her. The room was ice cold, her breath misting in the air before her. Instinctively, she knew she wasn't alone. Slowly, she turned toward the mirror mounted on her closet door. In its reflection, she could see her bed clearly, and the figure sitting on the edge of it, watching her sleep. Not Jung Seo-yeon this time, but a middle-aged man with cold, familiar eyes. Park Young-hwan. Minna gasped and spun around, but the bed was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone too. Yet the chill remained, along with the certainty that something had been there, something that had crossed the boundary between the living and the dead. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone to call Soo-yeon, needing the reassurance of a friendly voice. As she dialed, her eyes fell on the open folder on her desk, and a particular document she hadn't noticed before, a hospital report dated 2 weeks ago. Patient Park Young-hwan status: deceased, cause cerebral hemorrhage, secondary to skull fracture, time of death 3:17 a.m. Minna's phone slipped from her nerveless fingers. Park Young-hwan had died at the exact time she had first seen Jung Seo-yeon's ghost. And now somehow he too had found his way back. As if in confirmation, a soft tapping sound began from inside her wall. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. The same rhythmic pattern she had first heard in room 306. It seemed one haunting had ended only for another to begin,